Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. We are joined today by the legendary Paul Boy Green Esden Jr. Paul, thanks so much for joining us here today. Your channel is awesome. If you're a Jet fan, you got to check him out. Great interactions and, of course, great recaps after every Sunday. So thanks so much for joining us today, Paul.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Rich Sports Talk. And for people who don't know, behind the scenes, we've been working on this for a while. My people talking to your people, trying to figure out some dates. And, we got two celebrities here. That's what's got to happen. But it's great to finally pop the cherry and get on the show. It feels great.
I know. It's about damn time. So I'm so happy to get this all working. Look, we had to get on the show because, look, the Jets are winning and have a winning record. I mean, that is why we have to talk. The Jets are off to a great start this year. And look, they're more entertaining than Thursday Night Football has certainly been the last couple of weeks. So the Jets have been really great. And, like, you had some great comments today on Twitter, too, about Justin Fields. Man, if that kid can make it through the season, he deserves his own freaking award. I've been saying it since the start of the season. Like, I don't know how he's going to get through the season not being in a body bag because they are just beating the snot out of him in Chicago.
Yeah, that's the part that's really frustrating for me is because, again, unfortunately, I have to use that word. I've seen a lot of Bears games because they're being shoved down our throat in primetime football. But, my narrative heading into the year was like, man, the Bears have done a horrible job at Sam Darnold-esque, at least, and it is in more ways than one. But at first I thought, like, man, we got a talented kid here that just doesn't have anything around him whatsoever, so he's set up to fail. But after watching last night's game, my takeaway is, you know what, that's true what I said in the offseason, but also, man, Justin Fields, the lack of awareness, the lack of awareness in sacks, and also where everyone is, not trusting what he sees. There's a couple of wide open guys in the NFL that he just hesitates, like whether he doesn't think his guys can catch the ball, and maybe that's a good thing because his Bears receivers apparently can't catch the ball, but also of his own volition. So really, it's just it's a lot there for Justin Fields. A lot of people seem to be making excuses for him in the general public, which I find kind of weird. Matt O'Leary did a really good job of breaking that down, but yeah, it's a sad case for Justin Fields because I loved him coming out of the draft.
Absolutely. And there were still Jet fans. I remember even after the first week or two of the season that were saying that, and there's still Jet fans I feel would want Justin Fields to be the quarterback over Zach. And look, I think Zach was the better fit for the scheme. I think Justin had a little bit of a higher ceiling, but it is a great debate. And let's be honest, like the Jets showed how you build around a young quarterback this offseason. The Bears did the exact opposite. But one thing I'm also surprised with the Bears too, there's a certain guy that could maybe help their receiving core. I'm surprised that they haven't been calling 201 or calling over to Florham Park with Denzel Mims. Like, I keep wondering, like, I've been saying this is train camp. They seem like the perfect fit for Denzel Mims. Are you surprised also with all the injuries we've seen around the NFL that Denzel Mims is still actually on the Jets roster at this point? Because I'm pretty surprised. I understand that they're probably worried about all the injuries because of the past injury. Like, you remember 2 years ago, that infamous Colts game where they were basically lining up 5th and 6th receivers and they were basically practice squad players. So maybe Joe Douglas is a little scarred from that and he's just covering his butt, making sure like he's got enough depth there. But I'm surprised that at this point Denzel's still on this team considering how good the receivers have been, especially Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson.
Especially how you set up that question with all the injuries around the league, that you thought that someone would eventually, succumb, that someone would eventually cough up what is necessary. And according to Connor Hughes, that's a 4th-round draft choice is what the New York Jets are looking for, according to some of his reporting near the beginning of the season when the trade request became official from Denzel Mims on social media, that a 4th-round draft choice, which, again, is basically Chris Herndon value for what ultimately he was flipped for. Now, the only difference is Herndon's original draft status was a 4th-round pick, so kind of getting that back felt really good. Denzel Mims, of course, a former 2nd-round draft choice, doesn't feel as good, but at some point, it's some level of a salvage here, considering all the talent they have at wide receiver. So, yes, with that narrative of all the injuries, I am surprised that another team hadn't pulled the trigger. The Dallas Cowboys, the Denver Broncos, the Chicago Bears, and the other teams that were actually kicking the tires, Panthers, Seahawks, Vikings, and so many others. But Bears specifically for this, yeah, I mean, to think like for Justin Fields, what do you have to lose? If they're willing to kind of kick the tires on N'Keal Harry, why wouldn't you on Denzel Mims? That That to me is really puzzling. And so the fact that he's still on the team only says to me what you kind of already set it up there here on Rich Sports Talk, is the fact of the matter that maybe Joe Douglas is weary of putting himself in a position where an injury or two totally changes the dynamic of this receiver room. And again, just having that in your back pocket maybe is worth more than a fourth-round draft choice. I know all the F them picks, Les Snead stuff is pouring out here, but I just feel like from that perspective, I think Joe Douglas wants to protect himself. And that's not the worst thing in the world. I know we got a lot of Denzel Mims stands in our audience.
Oh no, like Denzel Mims is just like, you just throw Mims out there and there's a bunch of people. It reminds me, being from New England, when Tom Brady, eons ago, when Tom Brady first came and played in New England, there were still Drew Bledsoe people from Patriot fans. Like they kind of don't come out of the woods anymore, but they would come out and be like, well, I'll tell you, Drew Bledsoe is our franchise quarterbacks. But we've had enough of those Patriot scars, so we'll brush over that topic a little bit. But look, I'm just really happy with the way the Jets are playing. And one of the big reasons why I think this offense has turned around has been the offensive line. And really, Dwayne Brown, unbelievable this week, where there was talks about him potentially retiring. And look, this is someone that is the consummate professional, has stabilized that left tackle spot. And for me, he's kind of been the higher end of a DeBrickashaw Ferguson in this league, where DeBrick was maybe not a Pro Bowl every year where Dwayne Brown was, but they were guys that were constantly on the field, the consummate pros. And really, this was the first time in Brown's career he was injured up until this season. But you saw a huge difference in the offensive line when him out there. You moved AVT to right tackle. How important do you think Dwayne Brown is to this team, and how big of a signing was this by Joe Douglas to help stabilize an offensive line that, let's be honest, was in chaos in training camp with Fant being banged up and also Mekhi Becton's injury?
Yeah, pivotal is the only way to possibly say it about the initial edition, because remember, when the Jets were kicking the tires on old Dwayne Brown, it was potentially as a veteran backup swing tackle, according to Rich Cimini, and also the timing of it, because Mekhi Becton was healthy at that time. George Fant was healthy, to our knowledge, at that point as a starting tackle tandem. So really, Dwayne Brown was going to be an insurance policy. However, that was never able to come to fruition because Mekhi Becton, of course, goes down. So the flirtatious talks of, hey, maybe you could come in and be our swing backup, to, oh my God, you need to come in and be our starter, Dwayne. So the immediate shift in that conversation was injury riddled, and obviously contributed to the money. 2-year, $20 million deal with $9 million of that guaranteed. So he comes in and he's supposed to be that guy. Of course, the injury happens. And that's just classic vintage Jets fashion. You bring in a guy who's been a friggin' Iron Man, where 3 out of his last 4 seasons, he's played full campaigns. The only other one he missed for contests during that year. So he's been an absolute Ironman. So even at 37 years of age, we had an expectation that this guy would be a stabilizing force for the line. And then when the injury happens, and then it was really murky from people I was talking to, and now it kind of comes to fruition with everything we're hearing now, that it appeared serious, potentially season ending at the time. And of course, the season ending, as we found out from Ian Rappaport, was a torn rotator cuff. And if you have surgery on a torn rotator cuff, especially as an offensive lineman, you would have been out for the year. They tried a different philosophy here of opting against surgery. IR, misses 4 games, it comes back. I'm going to be honest, I thought he was out for the year. I thought, they're going to put him on IR, kick the can down the road, and eventually let us all know that he was done for the year. So when he actually, not only was activated, but immediately went into the starting lineup, I was pleasantly surprised. That's great news for the Jets, because that's one less position, especially with the Max Mitchell injury, that when you had AVT at left tackle and then you were going to have Connor McDermott at right, that was still like, oh boy. But to have Dwayne Brown back and Elijah Vera-Tucker plugging that hole until we get the rush back, whether that's George Fant, whether that's Max Mitchell, and Elijah Vera-Tucker could go back to right guard, like, it's a lot more palatable with that being the case, with Dwayne Brown being back. So he was an absolute home run, and man, what a leader. That, again, the words from Michael LaFleur, I tweeted out the clip, is that I'm not going out like that again. With him at 37, having this serious injury, which could have put him out for the year, he could have got his bag and walked away. But for him to say to the coaching staff, medical staff, oh, I'm not going out that way, F that, I'm going in. What a leader. It's awesome. And normally the Jets have had a history of the opposite of that. So that was really encouraging to see. An amazing leader in the locker room and on the field.
Right. And look, I think it also speaks to a bigger picture where when you look at the Jets in the past under Adam Gase and under the past coaches, it seemed like guys wanted to get out of here. Like if there was an excuse, like they were banged up, they found a way not to get back on the field. But I think it speaks well to this coaching staff and Robert Saleh that guys not only want to play here now, but they want to play hurt. They're willing to risk their careers. They're willing to go out there and play, where before it felt like under Adam Gase, if you got nicked up, it's like, okay, I'm going to be on the short-term IR, which could have been maybe a play-through injury. So that to me is really huge. And I think this is also indicative of the culture. And speaking of which, one of the biggest moves has to be AVT. I think he's the team MVP so far through the season. And it's funny. I talked to Jay Douzable last week. He feels that AVT should go back to right guard where he thinks he can get the most out of it. He believes that he's going to be an all-pro guard. And look, I do like him at tackle. He played great there last week. I think it is important to get the best 5 on the field, and Herbig feels like the best option right now, playing him at guard and AVT at right tackle. Do you feel like the Jets might be stunting Elijah Vera-Tucker's development slightly just by ping-pong him all the offense? Well, it's great that he's filling out these spots and doing an admirable job, that maybe it's going to take away from maybe a Pro Bowl appearance or a Pro Bowl performance at the right guard position.
By the way, nice flex having Leger Douzable on the show. You just casually dropping that in there, superstar. Very nice. Yeah, very, very nice flex job on that one. I will say that was my initial take, to be honest with you. I had an immediate YouTube video. So when at the NFL owners meeting, Robert Saleh reveals that, because we assumed, so Laken Tomlinson is signed by the Jets. We're like, oh, man, he's going to have no problem. We all assumed, like, he's jumping to right guard, or obviously, because AVT was going to stay at left guard. Of course he was. Like, AVT showed all this potential in his first year. Why would you even risk to potentially stunt the development? If it was even a chance, like even a 1% chance, like why would you do it? AVT is great. Get the veteran, to the old dog, to learn a new trick. And when Robert talked at the NFL owners meeting, he said, oh no, Elijah's jumping over. I went, oh man, I don't love this at all. Like, Laken, sure, he's plug and play. He's been in the system. That's cool. But why potentially even stunt the development of a youngster where he has to, and for people who don't know offensive line play, again, I did a great interview with Damian Woody earlier in the offseason where he explains it. But, in a simple, quick version is like plays are in reverse when you're switching from position to position, flipping sides, left guard to right guard, left tackle to right tackle. Like all the plays are backwards. So for someone like Elijah Vera-Tucker, who is flipping between 3 positions over the last 3 weeks and 4 positions overall in 20 plus games here with the Jets, like it is an unexplainable, impressive feat that he's able to accomplish here. But I'm going to be honest, all my fears, quite frankly, have been quelled. That I thought it could stunt him in some way, but seeing him with like little to no experience at right tackle, he never had experience, but left tackle, not since college, to seamlessly be moving from left to right and him doing it in this way, I've completely lost all my fears of any stunting of development. And quite frankly, I think even the opposite, like him playing these other positions will have a greater appreciation when he's back at right guard doing his thing. I think all it's going to be like, yeah, wow. Okay, look what he could do with like minimal prep. And he's been playing right guard predominantly for a little bit here, at least for the Jets now this season throughout the offseason. So all those fears have been quelled for me. I did have that initially, to be candid, in the offseason, but with everything I've seen so far, I no longer have those concerns.
I mean, let's be honest. It is better than having the Jets' 4th best tight end, Connor McDermott, playing right tackle. I mean, it's not a good sign when I keep saying this about McDermott. It's not a good sign when you're better as a tight end than you are as a tackle in the NFL. But look, despite all the injuries on this offensive line, they've been able to stabilize it. And we're seeing a lot of good progress from this team, including from the cornerback position. Look, I cannot give enough adjectives because, like, I cover the draft. I do mock drafts. I do analysis of the draft. And look, Sauce was one of my favorite prospects coming out. I didn't think he would go to the Jets just because of the offensive line situation. But even when he came to the Jets, I kept telling fans, be patient. Corner is the hardest position outside of quarterback to adjust to. And he's gone through the gauntlet the first 5 weeks, where now you look at the Green Bay matchup, you're almost like, he doesn't have to take on Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase or Mark Andrews. But is this just scary how good Sauce can be for this team? If he's this good now as a rookie, I mean, we see corners take 3 or 4 years before they can adjust to the game speed. And he's like, Tyreek Hill, no problem. Jalen Wall, not a big deal. Jamar Chase, no problem. Hell, Mark Andrews, a tight end. Okay. No, yeah. In my first game, whatever. It just seems like everyone's just getting lost in the sauce, and there was so much hype around him. I can't believe I'm going to say this. It's almost exceeded the expectations that we were expecting for Sauce this year.
Yeah, it seemed, quite frankly, impossible to match that level of hype that he had coming out. And for him to, again, the trust from the coaching staff to put him on Mark Andrews, who, again, is arguably the best tight end in all of football. And if you want to squint, he's top 3. So the fact that they were willing to put him on there when last year they were so regimented in what they did, corner left side, corner right side, we're not going to move them. We're not going to move anyone around. No shading, no covering, no nothing. And to go from that to adapt to the talent that they now have to be able to do that is special. And we looked at it the same way here. My Nolan Rich buddy, or Rich Sports Talk here on the show, is that my problem was I love Sauce as a prospect, but I almost kept him at arm's length because he's great. There's swag, the statistics, the coaches' stories I heard. I tried to get a lot of draft experts on to join me during the offseason. They talked about Sauce. And again, I kept him at arm's length because I didn't want to fall in love with the prospect that I thought there was 0% chance the Jets were going to draft based on old 49ers people I talked to about myths, about how highly they value corners and what premium resources they'd be willing to use into it. So I'm going to be honest, I was flabbergasted when they took him, but in a good way. Like, oh, man, I love Sauce. This is like special that he's actually going to be on this team and playing for him. But I'm like, man, how is he going to transition? The size looks good, but there was a lot of competition questions going from Cincinnati to the NFL level. Like, man, there was situational stuff where he'd play Alabama in the college football playoff or what have you, but what's it going to be in the NFL? And obviously he's answered all those questions. A favorite to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Hell, the Jets may sweep those categories in general. That'd be the first time since New Orleans Saints did it a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of talent there. He's been amazing, and I think you ended it with your question to me, is that if he's this good now, just imagine how much better he's going to be. I've heard Will Parkinson joins my show every Monday. He said he's on that Patrick Surtain, kind of trajectory. And if he's half that good, that would be special. So he's a really good player, and I think it's infectious to the rest of the team.
Yeah, Will's another one. He does unbelievable breakdowns. And guys, if you're Jet fans, make sure you check out his page. Check him on social media. Unbelievable. And look, like this is why I love this Jet community, because there's a lot of people that really love the game, but they also understand the game. I think that I hate the notion nationally that Jet fans don't know what they're talking about. Like, Jet fans might be some of the most knowledgeable fans out there, especially because we basically had been trained to watch college football for 12 years now and study the draft at nausea. I mean, think about it. Like, last year at this time, we would be watching Tankathon. Like, we'd be, the Tankathon sweepstakes would be going on for the last 10 years right now, but we're actually looking forward, which is great. And look, it headlines a big game in Lambeau this weekend. And I understand that the Packers are coming off a brutal loss. So I don't think Aaron is pretty happy right now. 12-0 coming off his last 12 losses. But I got to be honest, when we first saw the schedule as Jet fans, when it came out, I feel like everyone was like, oh God, like we saw at Green Bay and at Denver back-to-back weeks, and every Jet fan's like, all right, let's just hope that they're not ugly. But now all of a sudden, the way those teams have played, the way the Jets have played, you feel like these could be winnable games, probably more so the Denver game than this one. But still, I'm looking at this Packer team, and I understand that Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the most talented players we've ever seen play, probably in our lifetime. But man, I just don't love their offense right now. They just seem off to me. Am I out of character saying this? Like, look, they just seem off. Like, the communication doesn't seem right with that team. The offensive line, the wide receivers aren't on the same page. And I think this is a golden opportunity for the Jets. Like, heck, I'm not even if the Jets don't win this game, but they go toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau, I still think on the Fox game of the week, that's going to be a major statement by this football team.
Oh, they definitely will. I need to aggressively push back on that, though, where you said that Denver may be the more winnable game. I think both of these are imminently winnable games. Now, again, in the offseason, I think you're right that we all looked at this and said that's going to be tough. Back-to-back road trips, where are the Jets going to be at in their season? Those are all fair questions. But looking at it right now, I'm going to, are we allowed to swear on this show?
Go for it. Swear. Go.
I got to be honest. I don't give a flying fuck if Aaron Rodgers is pissed off heading into this game. I don't care if his panties are in twists. That doesn't bother me at all. I don't care if 12-0 and straight and all these losses. Like, what about the Jets? The Jets are desperate to be 3-2, to go to 4-2, to matter. They're desperate in their own way. I don't care if the Green Bay Packers are whining saying, "Oh man, we had an embarrassing loss against the Giants." Well, guess what? You're about to have another L. So get ready for that, sucker. So yeah, no, screw all the pissed off this or pissed off that. Like, all that is nonsense. So this one to me is eminently winnable on a lot of different factors. The fact of the matter is the Jets are really have a high usage of play action plays, and the Packers defense is 32nd in the league against play action passes. So when you combine those two things, that's a Zach Wilson bread and butter of this Mike LaFleur offense. So to be able to tap into that, the Packers rush defense has left much to be desired. That's Breece Hall sound the alarms. And also look at the quarterbacks that have been carving them up. Daniel Jones, Justin Fields. Like, look at these quarterbacks. Bailey Zappi. I mean, come on, man. We're saying that Zach Wilson, who's got all the juice in terms of the talent heading into this one. Now, certainly there has to be some more proof in the pudding and some more opportunities, but he just looks like a calm, cool, collected guy out there. And I think the Jets have a huge chance at winning this game. And to your point, it is the America's Game of the Week for Fox. It's a national audience, and it's so much, again, this is unfamiliar territory for Jet fans. Last night on Thursday Night Football, while you may not have enjoyed the actual football, if that was played, technically Washington won, but I think we all lost having to watch that. But at the end of the game, they were promoting the big games of the week that all NFL fans should be watching, and it's not like they're selfishly promoting it themselves. It's on Amazon Prime doing the game. It's Fox. They said, oh, wow, that Jets-Packers game. You guys got to watch that. This is unfamiliar territory. This is a massive opportunity. CJ Mosley said it best. I tweeted out the clip this morning at BoyGreen25 on Twitter, and he said that this is an opportunity for a statement win. And I think he is just leaking out what is happening in the locker room. They're all looking at each other saying, 7.5-point dogs on the road. Like, man, we can do this. We could go in there and punch these people in the mouth, and all of a sudden, the Jets are going to be creating even more buzz potentially at 4-2. So I think this is a winnable game. And to answer your very first question, this Packers offense looks broken. They have not been able to reach that next level, whether it's the missing of Devontae Adams, the lack of running the football to passing the football. There seems to be all kinds of discombobulation there from Matt LaFleur, who comes after the game and said, maybe I should have ran it more. Well, you're the one who makes those decisions, pal, so maybe you should figure it out. So they're all discombobulated all over the place. Again, it's still Aaron freaking Rodgers, and he's pretty talented, but there's no receiver you fear on this team.
Right. And the big thing, too, is the Jets got the running game going. And I'll talk about the defensive matchup against the Packers offense in a little bit. But one of the big things, too, and I've seen some criticism from not Jet fans, but Zach Wilson, people that don't love the stats. Like, they say, well, Zach didn't throw for touchdowns. He's not putting up big stats. I'm looking at this offense. You don't need a quarterback to put up gaudy stats in this West Coast type of system. You need a quarterback that's not going to turn the football over and make plays, and Zach did that exactly last week. But more exciting for me, this running game finally freaking got going. I was screaming for the first 4 weeks when the Jets were 30th in rush attempts. I'm like, you have two Ferraris in the garage with Breece Hall and Michael Carter. And it's like, yeah, we'll take the old Model T Joe Flacco out and just play with that instead. So I'm really excited to see this running game get going. And I look at this Packers defense. Yes, they're a solid defensive unit, but the Jets have also played some really good pass rushes already this year. Their offensive line, for the first time all season, will have all 5 starters back in the same positions, likely if AVT stays at right tackle, which I'm assuming is going to happen. Look, I think this is a great opportunity for this offense to maybe not put up a ton of points, but show that they're efficient and can move the football. And like you said, utilize that play action. Take some shots down the field, but more importantly, keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands on Sunday.
Yeah, there's a ridiculous amount of talent on this Packers team. Jair Alexander is phenomenal, one of the best corners in football. Rashawn Gary is playing at a superstar level this season. Like, when you start stacking them up and looking at every layer of that defense, they've got talent. They just have underperformed. They have not lived up to the billing, lived up to the hype of what their talent says they should be. By DVOA, the Jets actually have a better defense than the Green Bay Packers. So if you want to start diving into the analytics between the two teams, so the Packers have talent. They just haven't lived up to it yet. but I think there's a lot of things you could take advantage of on this team. And to answer that first point about Zach Wilson, again, all that talk to me is ridiculous. It's nonsense. That
Agreed.
is the maturation of a young quarterback, that you do what you need to do in the particular game. The Steelers game, they couldn't just run the ball. They had to throw it all over the barnyard because that's the position they were in, down 10, and Zach Wilson delivered. The Miami game, running game's going buck wild. I guess I'm going to keep handing it off. Good move, Todd. Let's keep doing a little bit more of that, please. So again, a good quarterback just takes what the defense gives him in the simplest forms. Football isn't always that black and white and that simplistic, but in this particular case, that is what it is. If the running game's working, Zach Wilson is selfless enough to say, okay, I've got no problem. 66% completion percentage, 1 rushing touchdown. Again, he was 2 half yards short of 2 more passing touchdowns. I think perception looks a little different with 3 total touchdowns from Zach Wilson in the blowout, as opposed to what ended up being with 2 Michael Carter vultures. Sorry, Breece Hall fantasy football fans out there. But, from that perspective, I think things look a lot different if you poke and prod this or that. And Zach Wilson, historically speaking, has been incredibly unlucky with guys being tackled at the 1 yard line, and thus them turning into alternate versions of touchdowns as opposed to counting on his docket. So all that Zach Wilson talk from other people, they just don't know football, and that's fine. You don't have to know football. You could sit in the corner and go play patty cake, but that's what football is, and Zach Wilson is maturing as a quarterback, and that's fun. And again, I love your explanation. 2 Ferraris in the backfield. That's exactly what they have, and I think there's still more for Breece Hall to accomplish. And this Packers defense, I'd be looking my chops if I'm Breece Hall.
Right. This is an unbelievable opportunity against this defense. And when you look at the offense, if we flip the field, I'm very curious because we saw what worked really well last week, which was a hyper-aggressive Giant team blitzing the house on Aaron Rodgers, getting him off of his timing. Now, the Jets pass rush has been significantly better over the last 2 weeks. They're getting a lot of pressures, especially John Franklin Myers, Carl Lawson. They're getting home. But do you think the Jets, because of the lack of, I would say, fear of these receivers, do you feel that they're going to be comfortable putting these guys on an island and blitzing more? Because, again, it goes against Robert Saleh's principles. Like, he wants to get home with the front 4. But we also saw what worked last week with the Giants. And the Giants don't nearly have the defensive talent that this Jet team does. Do you think Ulbrich maybe throws in a couple more wrinkles? Because we saw last week, if you do a wrinkle correctly, like the Sauce Gardner blitz off the edge, it can make a huge impact. Do you think we see a little bit more of that, or they're just going to try to get home with that front 4?
Ultimately, a zebra can't change its stripes. A zebra is a zebra. So I think from a base standpoint, it's going to be the 4-man rushes, but there's nothing wrong with a little dabbling, a little wiggle, a little shake to your bake, a little yin to the yang, a little mac to the cheese, if I will. So if I may. So for me, I think the exotic blitz package is situationally, again, the Jets studied the tape. They said, and again, depending on the hash they were on, it was either going to be Sauce blitzing from the corner, according to Roberts on the Michael Kay show. It was either going to be Sauce or DJ Reed. They got the right hash and right situation in terms of the Dolphins backed up from the great punt from the punt god himself, Braden Mann, who's absolutely delivering what set that play up. So for me, I'm cool situationally because Aaron Rodgers, historically speaking, is amazing against the blitz. There are examples, Giants and others, but those are outliers compared to the larger track record of blitzing Aaron Rodgers. But if you do it situationally, that's something that I would be an advocate for. And again, the more creative you can be with no Devontae Adams that you have to double team or be aware of where 17 is on a pre-snap basis, having Romeo Doubs leading 32-year-old ass Randall Cobb at wide receiver. Like, you look at these guys and none of them fear you. You could easily roll out the ball. Let's man up. We're not zoning up. Let's man up against these guys and get freaky. But I think from a base standpoint, it will still be 4-man rush. The Packers have a really talented offensive line with Bakhtiari, and Eldon Jenkins is really talented too. But I would still try the 4-man rush. Let Quinnen go crazy. Let Carl go crazy and use your rotation. And then situationally, because it's hard to trick Aaron Rodgers. He's been around the league for a long time. 4-time NFL MVP, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, 10-time Pro Bowler. We could go through all the accolades. He's good. So it's hard to trick him, but I would do it situationally with the exotic looks.
Right. And it is interesting, too, because tell me if you agree or disagree with me. The Aaron I'm most concerned about isn't Aaron Rodgers. It's Aaron Jones. It's this running game. This is the running game for Green Bay has been their strength. And look, the Jets' run defense has been better. It's been a little inconsistent. I do know one thing. In some weird way, Jermaine Johnson, I would love to see him play this week. A big impact. He's been great in the run, but I know a lot of Jet fans will also be happy because it pretty much guarantees that Huff's going to be on the starting roster on Sunday. If he isn't, I think there might be a small revolt outside of Lambeau when they hear that news on Twitter. But like, do you think that there's any certain lineup changes that they might do? Because we saw it, especially the first 2 weeks against the Ravens, against the Browns, more run heavy teams, that maybe they change up the personnel on the defensive line. I don't think they'll do too much, but that is something I'm also looking to. And we also had a great question on the defense, which I'll bring it up really quick. It's about Quincy Williams, because again, at practice this week, trending the right way. Do you think he's going to be available to go? Because having him back will be huge because of the speed he brings on this defense, especially covering the outside perimeter. And especially on a team that loves to run the running back screens to Aaron Jones, that could be huge getting Quincy back and be another factor to help the Jets turn the tide in this game.
100%. Jermaine Johnson is officially out. He's dealing with that ankle. Again, the Jets have been non-committal on what exactly the extent of that injury is, whether it's a low or high ankle sprain or an ankle sprain in general. I imagine he's going to miss a couple of weeks here. Again, the Jets are still playing it day to day. I guess all of us are day to day, as the great Dan Patrick would say. But no, so he's out, so he's not going to play, which is great news for all the Bryce Huff stands in our audience. And also keep an eye out for Vinny Curry. The return of the ghost of Vinny Curry could be activated. He could be a sneak through. Robert Sala said that's a possibility, so keep an eye out for that. That activation, if it's going to come, is going to come on Saturday. So that one could. So I imagine Vinny Curry potentially getting into the mix. Bryce Huff is locked in based on all the pass rush win rate, which again, he was really good, but it's good to see him actually put it into the stats. So the Jets coaching staff, can't outthink themselves and not get him on the field. So I imagine that's going to happen. And yes, Quincy Williams was a full participant. He's good to go. The only one who wasn't was Jermaine. So all the other injured guys look good, and including Quincy Williams, who, by the way, I know an imperfect player, but he is really, and again, the penalty in the preseason against Jalen Hurts was stupid. So Quincy still has a little bit of that in his game, and maybe you'll just never be able to coach that out. Maybe that's just, you got to kind of live and die by the sword. And Quincy is a relentless 100 miles an hour player, and he's, you can't coach it out of him, so you just have to take the good with the bad. But yes, him coming up with the screen game, as you mentioned, is going to be wildly important. And similar to Quan in a different way, when he lays a big thundering hit, it raises the level of the fans, it raises the sideline, and really gets the energy going. And his celebration is vintage. So, getting him back would be great for linebacker depth, which is important. They like to rotate guys there as well. Get a little less Marcel Harris on the field, a little more Quincy Williams, which I'm excited about. And man, for a Jets team that historically has been very snake-bitten with injuries, to see Quincy get the air cast around his leg and carted off the field, I assume season ending, and I think, and same thing for Max Mitchell had to be carted off the field. Jermaine Johnson had to be carted off the sideline. Like, when you see that coming out, and Connor McDermott was another one during the preseason, that when you see a lot of these injuries, you're like, oh boy, seen this before. And then for Quincy to not only be back practicing, but potentially be back playing, which again, I expected to be playing, and traveling for the Green Bay trip and getting some action in there. We'll see how quickly they go from bench practice to like full playing time. I still think Quan's going to be the starter, but again, they have a rotation, so Quincy will get in there situationally. But he is an absolute heat-seeking missile that I think is going to make a lot of different impacts from an athletic standpoint, and I think he's just a really talented player. So yes, Quincy back. I imagine he's going to be back, and also I think they're going to use him in a lot of different fun ways with his speed and his hit stick power.
Right, and part of the reason I think they brought in Quan Alexander was to bring in a player similar to Quincy's skill set to show him how it can work and have a veteran, maybe not teach him directly, but show him how to be, tackle in space, how to have the right read. So that was another reason why I love the Quan signing, which has been one of the best underrated signings of the offseason. And look, I understand that the rotation has been a hot topic issue among Jet fans. Like you mentioned, defensive line rotation, everyone's head half explodes on Twitter, basically. Yeah. But despite the rotation, let's get to Quincy's brother, Quinnen. I mean, Quinnen, I think, has at this point, I feel bad for Quinnen in regards because he does play a position where, unfortunately for the national audience, everyone just cares about sacks. Like they don't look at, they see Quinnen, they see a productive player, but they don't see how much of an impact he makes on the game. And look, I think Quinnen has established himself as one of the premier interior defensive linemen this year and continues to dominate. And look, I know it gets lost in the shuffle, but he's a guy that, look, I don't think you can ever expect him to be a double-digit sack guy. I'd love to see it, but he makes everyone on this defensive line better because he opens up a lot more individual matchups, especially coming off the edge. Like, so far through the 5 games, is it fair to say that Quinnen is the best player on the Jets? And has he played at an all? I think he's played at an all-pro level on the interior this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, AVT would be up there as best player overall on the team. But Quinnen, I get the fact that there's a conversation is good news. That's a good first world problem for the New York Jets. But yeah, I mean, he's been playing on fire. I tweeted it in the middle of his. I think he's still on the active 3 sack streak that he's on right now. A sack in 3 straight games. And yeah, he's been dominant. I mean, he's going to get paid. That's what I tweeted out, and I fully anticipate that's going to happen again. He still has the 5th-year option on his contract as well, so not a contract year for Quinnen. And they've already accepted that, by the way. They did that during the offseason. Yeah, he's a freak, man. Now, I don't know, to your point, right, is he going to be Aaron Donald or the 12, 13 sack guy regularly? But I think when you look at his stat projections, and he's never played a full season in the NFL to date, that Quinnen could easily, and he's pushed it in that 6, 7, 8 sack range. He hasn't played a full season. So if you squint, you could definitely get to that double-digit sack range. But I think his comfortable floor will hover between, 7.5 to 9.5 sacks every year. And as an interior defensive lineman, that's good. That's great. So Quinnen has played spectacular. You saw the jump you were hoping for. Again, one of the reasons maybe you didn't see it last year on top of the foot injury that kind of robbed him of a lot of the offseason was he was supposed to be paired with Carl Lawson, and they were supposed to help each other by shading, attention from the offensive line. So Carl continuing to kind of go off, and he had a coming out party of sorts against the Dolphins with his 7 quarterbacks hits, which was like the highest number in like 30 years for a Jets pass rusher. And then, the strip sack was great, which Quinnen Williams, got fed to the fumble, the stiff arm Tyreek Hill into a different universe. Like all of that was fun. And I just think Quinnen's going to keep getting better as the season goes on. He looks like a man on a mission, hell-bent on proving that he was not some bust or just some average player with the number 3 overall pick, that he's proven to people that there's a reason Robert Saleh came to the Jets, and I was one of those reasons that he came, and he's been spectacular.
He has, absolutely. And guys, if you have any questions, please put in the chat. We'd love to answer them. Again, really excited about this weekend. But look, I think speaking of Robert Saleh, before we basically do our picks for this game, I think he's done a lot because if you were to look back a couple weeks ago, like especially after the rough start with this team, after the first week, I was one of those people that, especially after the receipt comment, I was really down on Saleh because I'm like, look, Saleh, like I get what you're trying to do, but you just have to understand how Jet fans are reading it. Like we just got our teeth kicked in week 1. You're talking about taking receipts. Now, granted, they've been 3-1 since then, so it's obviously worked. But have you seen a significant progression of this coaching staff? Because again, I think fans love Saleh's energy. I think people like Robert Saleh as a person, but there's been a lot of Jet fans, especially in the comments, especially on Twitter, that I think part of it is also recency bias because they look across the way and they see how good Brian Daboll's been with the Giants, and it feels like Daboll's going to be a very good coach. We've also seen guys come in and flame out. But for Saleh, have you seen a lot of improvement with him this year? Because I see a lot of understanding. It feels like finally he's getting the idea of maybe don't over-explain things to the media, or maybe try to say, oh, Makai's good, and then he's out for the season. Zach is maybe going to play week 1, and he's out till Pittsburgh, guys. So I think he's slowly learning in that regard too. But I'd love to get your thoughts on what you've seen from this coaching staff throughout this early season.
Yeah, it's been an evolution, both because, Robert Saleh hasn't won game, and I'm saying this as we're evolving through the season, like he hadn't won games. Now, he's got a bunch of, 2 wins in a row, biggest blowout he's ever had as a Jets head coach against the Dolphins. Like now he's getting the wins, but dating back to the receipts comment coming off of week 1, like Robert Saleh hadn't done a lot, so he didn't really have the championship credibility. I know he won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, but he didn't like put the ring on the table and everyone, oh, whatever he says, we're buying into. Like, of course, naturally, like that's what you want from all your players. But sometimes it's you'll you got to see it to believe it. Not everyone believes that Santa's fat ass is coming down that chimney. Some people need to see it to indeed believe, and all the Christmas hoopla. So for me, I think that's what rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So on top of not winning, and then some of the strange comments with accountability, like, those plays happen. What do you mean those plays happen where Corey Davis gets emotional and makes a decision, or roughing the passer, which just lead the NFL, and roughing the passer penalties? Like, when you start going through a lot of this stuff, you're like, man, Saleh could be heading down a bad road. Now, I may have been in the minority as a Jets guy, Jets media and fan guy. Coming off of week 1, I love the receipts comment from Saleh. However, obviously, that increased the pressure to win, because if they kept losing and the receipts thing, you're going to get that shoved in your face, and maybe that creates some sort of firestorm if the season totally collapses, where you get fired for, something crazy happening. And Jet fans, by the way, in the middle of all that, were calling for him to be fired, so much so that I had to cover it for Heavy.com about all the Jet fans that were ready to move on from Saleh, which is crazy now to think about where everything has gone. But no, I think the evolution of the coaching staff has been great. I remember back to last year too, week 1, I read an article about after the week 1 Jets game that, remember, they lost to the Carolina Panthers. People said, ooh, Jeff Ulbricht's a future head coaching candidate. That's a real thing. That was a real article that was out there. And they said, fire Mike LaFleur, this inexperienced, guy who only got a job because of his last name. Right. And then you see how things evolved that season, where they're like, oh, wait, no, Jeff Ulbricht needs to be fired. Mike LaFleur's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then this year, no, Jeff Ulbricht needs to be fired. Like, it just, Jet fans are Jet fans. And I love them. They're incredibly passionate and intelligent and everything else, most of them. So, all that was really cool. But at the end of the day, I really love the evolution of the coaching staff this year. Robert Saleh, the hiring of Dan Shamash, and for those who don't know, that's his situational coordinator. And basically, what Shamash does is help him with analytics on a play-to-play basis, like, decisions. Oh, should we go for it here? Does it make sense? And Shamash's job is to, unleash that information to Robert Saleh. The Robert Saleh makes the decision. Just because Shamash says he should go for it doesn't mean Robert Saleh will.
Now, isn't also Shamash, isn't he also helping the defense this week too with the roughing the passer penalties too, which I think is
100%,
which is a huge thing. And look, I give the glad crank to that coaching staff, because it's one of those moves that we never see, we never talk about, but they're seeing what's going on around the league. And look, let's be honest, it's BS what's going on. Like, it's basically turning into flag football. But look, that the Jets are having that wherewithal and that attention to details. Like, you would hear stories out of Belichick in New England about how they had all those super minute details, which seemed insignificant at the time, but ultimately helped with the big picture. So I do think that is very good with this coaching staff. And let's be honest, you can tell the players love playing for these coaches. Like, they don't quit.
For sure.
And they're fired up in the fourth quarter. The Jets are outscoring teams in the fourth quarter. They're playing really well in the fourth quarter. I have to give them a lot of credit. My biggest thing with Robert Saleh, and I'd love to get your opinion on this too, is the thing I love about him the most that I can honestly say is I see significant improvement from the younger players, like under Gase, under Bowles, even under Rex. I didn't necessarily see a lot of guys progressing and getting better. Like, you've seen a growth from Elijah Vera-Tucker year 1 to year 2, Elijah Moore year 1 to year 2, Zach Wilson year 1 to year 2, and even these rookies. They come in, and it's not that they're just making impact plays. They are being significant players from day one. And a lot of that has to be the coaches and getting them prepared to be successful in this league, because it is freaking hard in the NFL. It's one thing to be dominating in college, but to go up to the NFL and continue to dominate as a rookie and win 3 Rookie of the Week belts, I mean, it's impressive. It's almost like now we're debating who's going to win the belt this weekend for the Jets. Like, will Michael Clemens enter the discussion, like with a couple sacks of Aaron Rodgers, or will we get a repeat of Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson? But a lot of that to me is on Saleh, is the development of these young players and why it's really exciting to see the growth of this team.
100%. And going back to Shamash real quick, who's, again, their situational coordinator, every Friday he pulls stuff from around the NFL so the Jets can learn their players, their team. It's a presentation in front of all the players and coaches, and he finds stuff, including the roughing the passer stuff, and to try to show them not just like, hey, guys, look at this BS on the screen like a comedian. Like, his job is to say, like, hey, look at these calls. This is how the NFL is calling it. This is the things that you have to try to watch out for. And again, the stats that I was able to dig up this week, that not only did the Jets lead the league, and they're tied for the league lead in roughing the passer penalties, Aaron Rodgers has the fourth most roughing the passers penalties called on him. In other words, Quinnen Williams said it earlier this week that, Aaron Rodgers can get those calls. There's numbers that back that up. He is the fourth most. He's the fourth quarterback who gets it the most in terms of repetition. And if we're just talking active quarterbacks, because Ryan Fitzpatrick's on that list since 2009, he is the third active on that list for drawing the most roughing the passer penalties from those who are going again. So hopefully it's a real point of emphasis, and it will be obviously today as they're having that Shamash conversation in front of the whole team. But that's an important piece to the puzzle because those could be game-changing plays. We saw it in Cincinnati where the Jets were going to get off the field and have a chance to take a lead in the Bengals game instead. We all know that JFM at the roughing the passer, which was one of the two the Jets have had this season. The Bengals end up scoring on that 56-yard Tyler Boyd touchdown, and that changes the dynamic of the game. So the Jets have to mind their P's and Q's. They can't be undisciplined, and we've seen a lot of that from their veteran players. So they really need to rein that in, or else it's going to cost them. It cost them in the Bengals game. It's going to cost them in future games from that perspective. But to work back, what was your question?
You just went on such a great spiel. The
Shamash stuff. Sorry about that.
I mean, I know it's good, but I just like having this conversation. Like, I think also too, like, you're going to see a little bit difference in the defensive backs, because even though I thought those PIs last week were egregious and not good calls, like you saw the one on Sauce, on DJ, and then my favorite was when Corey Davis basically got tackled down the field, but that's of course not a pass interference. So I do think it is important that the Jets are looking at how the refs are calling, because I was a referee myself, and I will tell you, like, we would have weekly meetings, go over film, and discuss what calls were going on and also the nature of the rules. So you can't tell me the NFL isn't sitting there week after week, especially after the 2 injury, especially after all the major penalties, that they're not sitting down as a league and looking at the film and looking at what needs to be adjusted. So I have to give the Jets a lot of credit for that. But look, especially in the chat, a lot of excitement about this team, about playing it with Robert Saleh. So I have to give them a lot of questions. And Andrew brought up a good point from earlier, because I'm a huge offensive line nerd on this channel. Like, I will talk ad nauseum about tackles. Like, when they made I loved the Max Mitchell pick at the time, and I talked about him, and people were like, why are you talking so much about Max Mitchell? I'm like, he's a freaking tackle, guys. Like, tackles are important in the NFL. I mean, I know they're not the icing of the cake, but they're the cake. I mean, without them, you're just eating sugar. So, but
wow, a good way to put that.
So, but I just look at this offensive line, at least for the next 4 weeks. I think this is going to be the combo with Nate Herbig at right guard, AVT. Now we'll cross the bridge when Mitchell hopefully gets back, when Fant gets back, who plays the right tackle position. But that will be a good problem to have at the time that they'll actually have to debate who gets on the field. But do you feel like this is the set Jets offensive line until they return from injury, left to right, Brown, Lincoln, Connor, then you have Herbig and AVT?
Yes, I do believe that's going to be the combination until they start getting the first world problem. It's funny that we entered the season saying, man, offensive tackle depth, question. And then now we're saying, man, now we got too many, because in theory you'd have Dwayne Brown, you would have Elijah Vera-Tucker, who has that capability. You'd have Max Mitchell coming back potentially, and then George Fant coming back. You're like, whoa, we got too many guys. What are we doing with all these guys? Which, again, is a problem I'm comfortable having after all the last couple of years. But yes, I believe that's going to be it. You're going to continue to have Dwayne Brown on the left, Laken Tomlinson at left guard, Connor McGovern, who's been really, really solid. Look at some of the numbers. I know a lot of people like to hate on Connor McGovern. And again, in terms of free agent additions, the Jets have had a lot worse. And we'll see the future decision at center there. And
right.
Then
and even Laken,
right guard, and then right tackle.
But even like Laken, people were killing Laken. I said, guys, give it time. It's a new team, new system. But also, it was a turnstile left tackle. Now, that, like you've seen with Dwayne Brown next to him, Laken has significantly played better, and that was his best game last week. So that's the thing I don't think people think about the offensive line, is the choreography that goes into it. And look, it's so much about chemistry. Like last year, we were killing McGovern, but we had Greg Van Roten next to him, as I like to call him, at right guard. And look what happened. They put the good doctor in there for a couple weeks, and all of a sudden, hey, the Jets are averaging almost 5 yards a carry in the run game. So it shows you just how important it is. If you have one bad spot on the offensive line, and they had it at left tackle, how important it is. And look, the Jets offensive line isn't great, but it's solid. And that's what you need to win in this league. You don't need to have like one of the top 3 offensive lines, but you need one that is serviceable and that will protect your quarterback. And look, Zach's thrown for over 70% completions in the last 5 quarters. And that's not a mistake, because I think the offensive line is finally settled.
Yeah, I think all of those reasons. Again, we'll deal with the first world problem down the road. We'll kick the can down the road. Again, George Fant will be the one, if I have my math right, comes back first because of the IR swaps, and then Max Mitchell after that, which raises an interesting question because Max Mitchell was playing very well and he's young and you'd rather see him develop. George Fant is on the last year of his deal. So what kind of swapping are you doing going on? I don't imagine you keep AVT at right tackle if and when George Fant comes back first. You'd probably put him back at right guard and Herbig would go to the bench. And then what do you do when Max Mitchell comes? So all of that is good first world problems that can down the road. But for the intermediate, for the now, they have a very solid offensive line. That's not going to be the reason they lose games.
Right. And look, when was the last time the Jets had first world problems? I mean, it's been years, my friend.
Don't know.
It's been too damn long where the Jets actually had depth at multiple positions. And look, I think that's really helped them early. And I think they're going to win this week in Green Bay. I know I try to call it right down the middle of the road. I try to look at both teams, but look, I feel like even though the Packers are going to be motivated, I know they got embarrassed on national early TV. And yes, it's national TV, guys. Like it's in a prime slot, even at 9 a.m. But I think that this is a Jet team that they just have momentum for the first time in a long time. And look, even if by some chance they play great and it comes down to a last second play where the Packers pull it out, I still think you'll feel confident as a Jet fan that this team has turned a big corner. But look, we're looking at this as an opportunity where if you want to make a statement to the country on a national 1:00 game, go take care of business in Green Bay, and the Jets have a golden opportunity to do that. And I think that they are going to at least make this a very competitive game, but I think they ultimately sneak it out because of their running game, because of their weapons. And look, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to get frustrated early. He's going to try to test these great corners the Jets have, and this is the best corner tandem that he's faced all season. Like the Packers have not faced a defense like this, and we saw it last week against the Giants. I don't think the Giants have nearly the corners or the defense that the Jets do.
Definitely not.
But they were able to throw him off, and that's the biggest thing for this team. If they can get him out of his rhythm early, get Aaron Rodgers pissed off and frustrated early, that to me is going to be the key. Get him off his mark, get him making maybe not mistakes like throwing the ball to the Jets, but not connecting with receivers and not having that chemistry with receivers, because we've seen it. If he's not connecting with his receivers, he'll be the first one to blame the offensive line, the wide receivers, the tight end, the coaches. It's not his fault, but he'll be quick to blame someone else.
Yeah, and the other factor I would say is, remember, the Packers are coming off of London. Now, for fans who are unaware of this fun fact, when an NFL team is selected to go to London, the NFL schedule makers will offer them the choice to have their bye immediately after London. If they say no, then the NFL schedule makers will just put their bye randomly at a different point in the season. The Packers declined to do that, which means they're coming from international waters to the Jets, which means that there's going to be some level of a lag. And there's actually historical nuggets that actually say that NFL teams that are coming off of those lags from London immediately after start games incredibly slow from a scoring perspective, which could open the doors for the Jets. And if the Jets are this fourth quarter team we believe they are, and they could get a potential point advantage early in the game, that's math that I like. I didn't go to school for math, but that's the kind of math that I could sign up for. So them coming from London's another factor. In back-to-back weeks of having these teams that had extra rest, Pittsburgh coming off of Thursday night, Miami coming off of Thursday night, the Jets are 2-0 in those games, so it's nice to get an advantage the other way. That will be the same case for their next game in Denver. Denver Broncos are playing on Monday Night Football. God help us all. But that will be a team coming off of a short week coming to the or playing the Jets in that next week as well. So the next 2 weeks, the Jets will have that advantage, particularly in this one. And I think that could be huge in this game.
Right, absolutely. And those are great nuggets. And that's why I love following your work, because you have all these great nuggets, especially coming off the London game. Like, that is a great nugget. And look, you're right. The Jets have been at a disadvantage the last 2 weeks off the short buys that basically the other teams had. But now they're coming in. And let's also be honest, too. Like, the Jets are the type of team, like I keep saying this, play it close in the fourth quarter because we see screwy things happen, because still nationally, and I think for a lot of NFL teams, they still view the Jets as the team they should be beating. So if you are the Packers, if you are the Broncos, and you're in a close game in the fourth quarter against the Jets, I feel the Jets are loose. They're playing aggressive. They have great energy. And because of the rotations, they're fresh. Where all of a sudden, if you're the Packers or the Broncos, you're going, oh shit, this is a game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
and they tend to tense 100%. Up. Like, I do think that's something that also plays into this, to the Jets' favor as well. And look, I think this is a great opportunity for Zach Wilson. And look, he doesn't have to go out there and throw 3 touchdowns and 350 yards. He just has to be efficient and move the football down the field. I know Jet fans want to see him put up with gaudy stats, but look, I just care about wins. And I think you can definitely win a lot of games. And Zach is proving that he's comfortable in this system, especially year 2. Like, I was worried about the rust. Last week, I think he took away a lot of our fears that he was going to have rust, especially after missing all that time early in the season.
Yeah, I'm not worried about, in terms of the gaudy numbers comment. I believe those games are going to come. Maybe that's here against Green Bay where you could get after him a little bit. Again, I think the holes in the running game will probably lean to a heavy run scheme just like it did last week. But I think there's going to be a little Zach Wilson versus Aaron Rodgers stuff. So, again, I'm not worried. Zach Wilson will do what is necessary for the game, but we're going to get plenty of pops this season that remind us why he was the number 2 overall pick.
And look, like, I know there's a lot of people that don't love Zach, but I think both me and you agree. Like, Zach, we both love Zach. We love the way he approaches the game. And look, I've seen a growth in maturity from him. The way where, look, I think there is a lot of pressure on these young quarterbacks where they want to put up the big stats. They want to put up the big numbers early and really cement themselves. And look, there's unfair pressure because you've seen Justin Herbert, you've seen Jalen Hurts, you've seen a lot of these guys take off early in their career. And if you don't have this meteoric rise in your first 2 years, people don't think you can play in this league, which I think is absurd. But you're already seeing it now. We talked about earlier, Justin Fields in Chicago. People are already starting to turn on him, even though he's only played less than 25 ball games in his career for a team that has been neglectful. But look, I agree with you. I think this is a great opportunity for the Jets to win. I think they're going to win this opportunity. And who would have thought? I kept saying coming to the year, Jets need to be 3-6 by their bye at the bare minimum. And we are past that. And if this team can somehow have a winning record by the time we get to week 9, that is absolutely going to be huge going down the backstretch of the season.
Oh yeah, expectations. Obviously, I think they changed from a national perspective. Not for me. I had the Jets going 9-8 before the year starting, but for a lot of other people who weren't as high on the Jets as that, I think the Dolphins game was a statement, and beating Green Bay and going to 4-2 would be the other statement. Again, national audience, everything you just said, Fox game of the week. Again, this is an opportunity to tell the rest of the country who the Jets are, and I think the Jets are fully aware of that fun fact. And again, you have a winning season after the bye. Oh my. Move over, of course, playoffs, toot Jim Morris Sr. Playoffs. Yeah, we're getting all that.
Playoffs? Talking about playoffs, it's also just great that the city of New York actually is competitive and in the football right now, which is great too.
Of course,
I would like my Mets have been more damn competitive over the last 2 weeks of the season, but that I can go on another hour rant, but we do not have time. Again, this is Paul Boyd Green. Thank you so much for joining us as always. He's the man. Check him out on social media. He has countless live streams. If you're a Jet fan, and especially if you love great stats about the Jets, I mean, this guy just pulls nuggets out of the air. Like, I've worked in stats, but the stats you come up with, man, like, I don't know what rocks you look under. I don't know, like, what sources you have, but you come up with some great statistics about the Jets that really tell a great story about this ball team.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thanks to you so much, man. Try to have a little variety in the day, a little fun, a little laughs, a little bit of everything. I mean, I think that's what we all need, and tries to make it for a full, pleasurable experience on all the social media and live streams. So I hope fans get a kick out of it, and feel free to hop on over to any of the live streams. We do them often, and of course, every game, 2 hours after the game, we're on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoydGreen25, and of course, other videos throughout the week. So feel free to stop by, everybody.
Yeah, guys, get our thoughts. We'll both have live reactions after the game on Sunday, so definitely check us out, get our thoughts, and let's hope we'll be talking about this. Maybe we'll get some cheese and wine to celebrate if the Jets pull out victory.
Ooh, very fitting. Yes,
and it's appropriate. Or it's also Wisconsin. We get some beer to celebrate too.
There you go.
Beer and cheese. That's the way to celebrate.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here on Rich Sports Talk. We will see you next time, and let's hope the Jets pull off a big victory in Lambeau Field this Sunday.